So I'm ultimately working 60 plus hours a week at a restaurant as an executive chef.
Yeah.
And then I'm pulling another 20, 30 hours a week doing side gigs and making sure, my now new wife of 13 years, 12, 13 years is taking care of it.
Yeah. If you ever worked a double, burned your hand, still showed up, this one's for you. This ain't just a podcast, it's the culture, it's the people, it's the industry. Real chefs talk, and everybody gets heard.
What's going on, y'all? Welcome to Real Chef Talk. I'm your host, Chef Darius, and today's guest is a living example of what resilience really look like. 15 years ago, he was a single father living in a shelter with his two sons, balancing survival, culinary school, and long hours working every position he could in the restaurant industry. He didn't just push through the struggle, he learned from it. Today, he's the owner of a thriving catering company and serves as vice chair of the very shelter that once gave his family hope. His journey isn't just about success. It's about honesty, accountability, and what it means to come full circle. This conversation isn't about overnight wins. It's about the roads in between. Please welcome my guest. Hey, Chef Matt, how are you?
Good. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. This is exciting. I'm excited to have you. Thank you for coming in as a guest.
Absolutely.
We're going to get straight into it. Tell us about yourself, where you come from. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing.
Yeah, sure. So born in Southern California, I grew up in Pasadena. That's where I was born, 1982. And,
Wow.
grew up doing the whole growing up part of life. I guess you could say siblings, mom, single parent. And, my childhood was basically wrapped around going to church every Wednesday and Sundays, and then always in the kitchen with mom. Mom owned a baking business. And so I was the one of now 11 of us,
Yeah.
kind of in there doing my thing, learning, trying to understand how the chemistry of baking works. And I didn't really like it, but it was something to do, kept my mind off of things. ADHD is
Yeah.
strong in my bloodstream, if you will. And so I needed a focal point in my life to keep me grounded. And that's what baking did at the time. But you grow up, you do stupid things, you have fun, you don't have fun, and life has a way of pushing you where you need to be and highlights your talents as you get older. But we moved to Monrovia my sophomore year, and that's kind of like a pivotal point in how things changed for me, because I got real heavy into music. Was in the Christian group, at the high school, and just loved everything about that. But then after high school, once again, life changed, right? Like 2, 3
Yeah.
years after high school, had kids, thought I was, doing the right thing. Music wasn't something I was willing to pursue with kids on the way. And so I had to
Hmm.
reinvent myself, but didn't know how. Unfortunately, I ended up moving to Arizona in 2007. The individual I was seeing or married to at the time was not
Hmm.
faithful and messed around on the side, and so we packed everything up and moved to Arizona, where we started new. And that lasted for 2 years. After that breakup, divorce, however you want to say it, we still had two kids, right? And
Yeah.
I lost everything. I lost my job, I lost the house, I lost cars, everything, but I kept the kids. I checked into a homeless shelter because I had no other place to go.
Yeah.
I was working doing multimedia and home installations for security systems and stuff like that. Nothing to write home about. Life was pretty boring, actually. But
Hmm.
I had two kids, they needed fed. So yeah, I jumped around a lot, but like it's easy to reflect upon because it's still something I live with every day. But while at the homeless shelter, I was in culinary school. There was a point where I needed to let go of music and figure out how I was gonna make money, and not only just support myself, but support the kids and go through the process of custody battles and, you know, not having anything really. Making $9
Yeah.
an hour under a celebrity chef does not exactly pay your bills, right?
Right.
Uh, let alone make you take care of two kids financially.
Yeah.
Being under the celebrity chef, I found that reignited love for cooking again. And this time it wasn't baking. There was no specific chemistry or recipe I had to follow every given
Mm.
time. So I fell in love with that and never looked back. But the struggle was still real. I'm still in a homeless
Yeah.
shelter. I say homeless shelter because it's easy, but the definition of the community really is a homeless housing community. And the organization is called House of Refuge. Now, House of Refuge is still near and dear to my heart 15 years later.
Hmm.
I sit on the board of directors as the vice chair currently, and it's a endless giving back moment for me. Every year we
Yeah.
do a gala, and I donate a private dinner. Last year was the the biggest donated dinner and money raised for the organization in terms of what I do for them, where we
Hmm.
raised $22,000 within 5 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, it had me in tears because it makes you reflect on how small your life or those terrible moments you're going through may seem at the time, but the
Yeah.
outcome of being able to give back and rising above everything you've been through just stops, and you're forced to
Yeah.
look at it and forced to see where you're at and what you've done. And not just that, but the impact that you're making on others. So it was and still is a very big piece of my life. But I was, been at rock bottom, and I don't plan on going back, but it's the life lessons that
Yeah.
have constantly giving back
Yeah.
to everybody around me. So I talk a lot, sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. You're fine. When people hear successful caterer, what part of the story do they usually miss?
They miss the behind the scenes almost every single time. A lot of people see the surface level like, oh, this guy's got a lot of clients. His list of clients are endless, or he's traveling all over the
Mhm.
world for this client and that client. But what they don't see is the heartache, the pain, the struggles. When I first started this, it wasn't something I planned on doing. I was still in a restaurant, and I
Mhm.
was at a point where I was getting business on the side. So I'm ultimately working 60 plus hours a week at a restaurant as an executive chef.
Yeah.
And then I'm pulling another 20, 30 hours a week doing side gigs and making sure, my now new wife of 13 years, 12, 13 years is taken care of. And then the kids are now older, but still I have to make sure that they're maintained and,
Yeah.
trying to make sure I don't burn out. But like you don't see the behind the scenes, the struggle, the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into the plate or the menu writing. And ultimately, if I were to give you a takeaway, like when I show up at somebody's door, like they think the time starts then and there. Like
Right.
the reality of it is I'm sometimes 6 to 8 or even more hours into it, just emailing, planning, coordinating, staffing, shopping, all this stuff
Yeah.
that you don't see. They just see me walk up with Cambros and cute
And the
smile, if
food
you
is
will.
ready.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everything's ready to go, but that's unfortunately not the reality of it. And so I'm 9 times out of 10 mentally and physically exhausted before I step into that door. But as soon as I step in the door, it's cameras on, everybody's watching,
Yeah.
and I get that adrenaline rush. But then I crash and burn hard when I get done with it. So it's an endless cycle of maintaining the mental side of it, and then obviously the physical aspect too, which I'm
Yeah.
feeling now. So but that's
Yeah,
okay.
no, I definitely understand what you mean because I know even for me, like I remember working those 18-hour days. So
Yeah.
I remember one time I looked at my pay stub and it said I had over almost 100 hours in overtime, and I'm like, how does that happen, yo?
Yeah, right. You just
Yeah,
get lost in it, unfortunately, and when it becomes second nature, you don't have to think about it. You just push forward, and no matter what comes your way, you have to pivot and
yeah,
adjust. And that I think is a skill set and a lifelong lesson that you learn to adapt with, because life will throw you curveballs in and out of the kitchen, and how you maneuver around those curveballs is very impactful to your state of mind and where you're actually trying to go in life. So it's not just a kitchen type thing. You learn
yeah,
to use those skills outside of the kitchen as well.
yeah. How did you manage being a father while being homeless and still going to culinary school to thrive to get to where you at now in life, where you have your own company and things like that? What was that like for you?
It was a very vulnerable point in time because I had a panel of 12 different individuals while I was at the shelter, if you will, and each person dove into a different aspect of my life. So I had somebody digging into how to fix my car, digging into my financials. While they're digging into my financials, I was doing financial classes on how to not blow my money, but also save it and build up to repairing the car or putting better quality food in front of the kids. And I contribute that part of my life to being a very big part of my success, because you have people dissect certain things that you don't want them to know or want people to
Yeah.
really find out about you. But then while they do it, you also learn where your weakness is and how you could overcome that weakness by just making a slight tweak here or there. But I owe a lot to that group. And one of the biggest key players on that table of 12 was my attorney at the time. You know, she was doing everything
Mhm.
pro bono because, again, making $9 an hour under a celebrity chef, you make no means of doing anything really possible. But
Yeah.
I was able to set a lot of the custody stuff in concrete and not have to worry about child support, not have to worry about paying for daycare or anything that came with it. Because while I'm going through the motions of the classes at the shelter and just doing all the ins and outs of that, they
Mhm.
were raising money behind the scenes to help take care of my child's care so I could continue with school and I wouldn't have to worry about, the financial burden of the kids being taken care of. So
Yeah.
there were a lot of things taken off my plate at the time that normally otherwise would still be a heavy weight on your shoulders. But that's the cool thing about this organization is they don't just give you the roof over your head. They give you the tools to succeed. And that's something I'm going to take with me up into my last breath, because it's invaluable. You can't put a price on something like that, and I wish I would have never gone through the experience, but I don't think I'd be where I'm
Mhm.
at about it. So it's wild because yes, it was only 15 years ago, but I was able to learn how to cope and manage myself better and also
Yeah.
figure out those red flags in life. Unfortunately, I lost my father while I was at work,
Mhm.
and I told myself, like, yeah, that's probably one of the most painful things I've ever had to go through, because
Great.
I didn't know the man very well. He bounced when I was 2, but, like, that's a relationship I'll never gain closure over. So I
Yeah.
told myself, if something ever were to happen with my mom, like, I'm gonna choose my mom over work, and that's exactly what happened almost 4 years ago now, and I was working at a diner. My
Mhm.
buddy Adam Allison, Chop Champion, shout out to Adam, owned it, sold it, and then I took it over. I signed a 3-month contract to bring the place back to life and
Mhm.
put my heart and soul into it. And then my wife and I took a vacation to Alaska. We came back, and the day I was supposed to return to work, I found out my mom was in the hospital, and I was told by my stepdad that she probably wasn't going to make it out. And so I made the call to talk to the owners and say, look, I got to go. Like, I understand this looks bad. Like, I just got
Yeah.
back from vacation, but like, I gotta bounce. I'm gonna drive to
Mm.
California and I'm picking my mom over work. And they
Mhm.
told me, if you leave, you're not coming back. And I left. I haven't been back. I haven't had a W-2 job in almost 4 years. And that's
Wow.
because the clientele base I had leading up to all of this just embraced my choice of leaving and pursuing my own happiness through doing
Mhm.
something for myself in terms of work. And, it's been a ride. There have been
Yeah.
where I haven't had any jobs, but then there are weeks or months and, almost years
Yeah.
that I haven't had a day off. So it's rewarding. It's exhausting, but it's rewarding.
So exactly how did you get into the catering aspect of business for yourself, coming from leaving the company that you were with because of your mom and that situation? How did you pivot into your catering company?
So, I mean, it's pretty simple yet complex, because I didn't have a kitchen. I didn't have a van or anything you would need to necessarily
Mhm.
have a catering company, but I had a garage. I had a wife that was very supportive. In fact, my wife came up with the name, and we'll circle around that in a bit. But like, I didn't have anything. So I would do a job, and instead of paying myself, buy equipment that I needed or I knew I needed. And then, a year and a half into that, I found somebody renting space at a kitchen. So I would pay
Mhm.
monthly to not only store stuff at the kitchen, but prep items for bigger events and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
then my supplies, if you will, just accumulated over time. And I had a garage full of stuff that, didn't exactly excite my wife, but at the same time, she knew
Yeah.
I was bringing money in and making stuff happen. But like, you just you start from nothing. I watched the video this morning on the owner of Virgin Atlantic Airlines or whatever it is, the
Mhm.
Richard Bronson or whatever his name is. And he started an airline with no money. It just cold
Mhm.
called Boeing and was just like, hey, I know you have a plane that's not being used. Can I rent it out? And then they refused and refused and refused. And finally somebody took to it and was just like, fine, you could rent it out for 200,000 a month. And he did
Yeah.
and just built this entire airline out of nothing really. And so that's essentially what I've created. I don't think I'd ever want to go back to working at a restaurant. I might at some point find it crazy in my bones to open up a restaurant, but I
Yeah.
I just had to build piece by piece, and take on clients, partner with Airbnbs, partner with, the worst possible clients out there temporarily to just build the reputation, build the momentum to keep things going. And, I think the last 2 years has been where it's actually started to flourish the most to the point,
Mhm.
fast forwarding, 5 months ago, my wife and I walked in, paid cash for the very kitchen that I was renting for the last
Mhm.
3 years, 2, 3 years, and so
Wow.
yeah, wow is a good way to sum it up. It's something I still lose sleep over sometimes, not in a bad way, but because, like, 15 years ago, dude, I had nothing. Nothing to my name,
Yeah.
kids that barely could eat, and when they did eat, it was better than I did because I was often going to sleep with no food, but, like, now being able to stay grounded in my roots and the humble beginnings that lifted me to where I'm at means everything.
Mhm.
The name, it's a big tribute to my mom. My mom is still around, thankfully. I spent the week out there, and I don't think she would have lasted or even made it through if she didn't have family by her side. So
Mhm.
growing up, we grew up in a house on Ansley Avenue in Monrovia, California. And that's where the identity of Matt and cooking came from, because that's really where I pushed everything to push forward in the cooking life. And so my wife and I were debating on a name a few years ago, and she's like, just name it something Ansley related. And that's obviously Ansley Avenue is where I was growing up and learning how to cook the most. And I was like, well, Ansley table. You need a table to eat. That'll contribute, mom's
Yeah.
part of everything. And so boom, Ansley table was born literally at our dining room table. I slapped an LLC on that as quickly as I could possibly think of doing.
Yeah.
And, the rest was history. But like, I don't know, like I've fallen into the success because of my determination of never wanting to give up and never wanting to fall back into homelessness. And I think you could relate that to being fear.
Mhm.
When you go through something so traumatic, not just a divorce, but it's like affair, divorce, homelessness, nothingness, like
Yeah.
what do you do? How do you pick up the dirt around you and mold it into,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
No,
wild.
it is wild because even right now to this point in my life, I would say I'm not exactly where you were at, but I'm at a point in my life where I just stepped down from management,
Mhm.
working as a chef because I'm like, yo, there's no way that I will ever become rich by, continuously
Yeah.
working countless hours to build somebody else. And, I kept seeing how much it sort of made me unhappy how much hours I was putting in for somebody else and grinding for somebody else. And I'm like,
Right.
yo, I want to take this energy that I have for helping somebody else build for myself now. So I've
Mhm.
stepped back from kitchen management and I'm currently back in school,
Nice.
starting January 18th, for business management because, I feel like I already have the downside. I already have the side of, cooking up, down pack. I already know how to run a restaurant. I know how to do inventory and things like this. So why not go back to school so, I can learn how to, so I can have that credential of running a business
Right.
for myself,
Right.
um, and continue pushing for myself. I'm in that place where I'm like I'm looking at myself. I'm like, man, was that a smart decision to step away from the money that you were making, to take this chance out on yourself? And I would say yes, it is. It's a
Right.
process of going through, but uh, it's about the focus point of where we're going. Um, to get to that success in life.
No, 100%. Yeah. I mean, you have to, it's unfortunate, that the industry is soul sucking, and I know there's a better term to put in that phrase, but like for me, that's how it feels. Like you being in the management level, sous, exec, chef, whatever, like you see
Yeah.
the outs of the books. Really, like
Hmm.
food aside, you see the numbers, you know where the money's going, where the money's not going, aka in your pockets, right?
Yeah.
And it's a hard realization to make for yourself. And so the fact that you're actually going, okay, I need to step away from this. I have the experience of running a kitchen, managing a restaurant,
Hmm.
and now I'm going to channel it into something for me, because ultimately your payoff will be bigger and better. Whether you
Hmm.
see it in a year or not, like it'll eventually snap into place and get you in a better spot mentally and physically, right? And so that's where it was at for me, because I just really got tired of working endless hours for $60,000 a year, man, and you're, like, struggling to still pay your rent, pay your bills, but yet the owner's
Yeah.
sitting nicely, and they have all the latest and greatest, and they're working maybe
Yeah.
20 hours a week, so
Hmm.
it's a fair trade, and I commend you for it. A lot of people get stuck in the cycle of constantly just going through the motions of a restaurant because they feel there's nothing better.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you keep yourself grounded, peace wise? How did you keep yourself going, and how do you keep yourself going, in come when you come out of this stressful situation? Like, what do you do to 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 keep pushing?
So before I learned any better, it was alcohol. I never got into drugs, never did any of that crazy hard stuff. But for me, it was like I needed an instant shutdown. And on a couple beers or some whiskey, whatever, like you get that instant shutdown, you turn your mind off. But now I've learned to channel it into, I do Legos. Like it's a healthier outlet for me. And so I'll go a week or two with just getting swamped, and I have to force myself to sit at my desk and build Legos to escape the reality of everything I'm up against, everything I just came down off of. My wife and I will go out for a walk, or, talk about the day, or we have animals, so we love on the animals. So I'm learning a more productive and healthier version of escapism, because I can't beat myself up any more than I'm already doing by doing what I do. So I lean into friendships a lot more than I have ever done in the past, because you need that outlet. You need the camaraderie and the friendship to escape from not just your work life, but even at times
Right.
hardships of your own personal life. So yeah, leaning on friendships, as dumb as it sounds, leaning on a bag of Legos, a set of Legos. It's an expensive habit, but I know where the money's going, and I'm not snorting it, or I'm not, pissing it out
Yeah.
24 hours later. Yeah, I think that's part of
I
it, but
mean,
then I also give back. A
yeah.
lot of it is feeling real at times. One
Yeah.
of the biggest takeaways from the restaurant industry was you're a machine. You do what I say, when I say it, how I say it. Your ticket times have to be under this amount of time, and so you just get into the regimen of being what other people want you to be, because
Right.
you have to serve the public and everything has to be
Mhm.
perfect. And now that it's like I'm away from that, I still have those dangerous mentalities, but I could step away for a minute and go, I'm not a machine. This
Mhm.
is my menu. I wrote it. I could still create it on the fly
Yeah.
as I want. I don't have to look to somebody else to tell me it's right or wrong. So, and
Mhm.
that's how I treat my staff. Like I have Josh. Josh is my right hand man, and I've been with Josh. He's been with me for 4 years, but I've known him for about
Mhm.
8. And we started working at a restaurant together years ago, and then he followed me into the catering world. And I'm the creative mindset type. I'll give him a menu, and he will pull the vision directly out of my mind without even asking me. He'll just
Mhm.
execute it properly, and I treat him so in a way because I don't want him to feel like a machine. He's already got another job where he's working full time at a restaurant.
Right.
So he's got that machine mentality. And I just say, here's the menu. Your interpretation is you. That's what you want of it. I'm not going to tell you how it's going to be. But surprisingly enough, he'll take my vision somehow and put it on a plate the way I envisioned it personally. Allowing people to thrive is key. You don't have to be that constant machine that they
Mhm.
want you. You have to be able to step out of your own skin and the comfort zone and push something out as
Yeah.
it's coming from you, because it really is. People,
Yeah.
and I think you can relate. People miss the fact that like a plate that goes out is a part of Matt, is a part of you and anybody else on the
Mhm.
line that they're giving up, because it takes love, time, and energy to do so. And it's
Mhm.
often missed. So
Yeah.
I try and bounce that back onto my staff. So
Yeah. We talked a little bit about the burnout, but what is the beauty of working in the culinary industry? Why should someone who's looking to be in the culinary industry or in the hospitality industry, why should they want to be here? But despite, the hours, or despite what we may go through, why should they look forward to coming into the industry?
that's a heavy question. I was like already pinpointing a couple answers, but I think the beauty of the restaurant industry isn't the restaurant industry itself. It's the friendships, the teamwork behind the line, and ultimately for me, it's about the serving of the clients.
Mhm.
You hit people where they don't necessarily need to be hit. They don't feel where they're being hit, but at the end of the day, like you're feeding them nourishing food. And maybe sometimes
Mhm.
you're not, right? You could be serving them a burger or a fish fillet or whatever. But like ultimately,
Mhm.
like they are benefiting from your service. You're giving a
Mhm.
piece of yourself, your life, to make others feel joy and comfort, all because
Mhm.
you put food on a plate. And to me, that's the biggest takeaway. I start and finish every client from email to wiping the counters. And I think for me, having somebody new come in is not about the routine. It's about falling in love with why you're there, falling in love with the passion that was ignited in you at one point, or it still may be ignited, or you're just covering it up and you're trying to let it out in a different way. But I think ultimately you have to know and understand that like the love is there fueling the passion. And
Mhm.
you're going to get that in return with the right job, with the right clientele, with the right staff and friends around you. So keeping an open mind at the same time as to where things can go helps as well. So I
Right.
think ultimately, like, dude, like we're in the service industry, and whether people like it or not, like you're giving up a part of yourself to please somebody you may not even know. You'll probably never even
Yeah.
see again, but there's a lasting impact regardless of whether you think about it when you walk away or not. The coolest thing for me is like I'll run into people in my neighborhood who I've cooked for 3, 4 years ago, and they're like, dude, that meal is something we still talk about today. And I'm like, that was just a steak that I overcooked by mistake. I forgot your bottles of wine, or all these
Yeah.
tragic events took place, but they're like, dude, that steak was one of the best steaks I've ever had, or that creme brulee, or whatever the dish you're making that night,
Yeah.
it was still an impactful memory in their mind. And to me, that's the coolest thing ever. Like whether I die today or tomorrow or in 3 to 6 years, like, and they're still around, they're still going to remember, oh man, Matt made this really cool dish. And it's a lifelong impact that you make on people. So going into it, yeah, you're going to get beat up, but you're going to change somebody's world, whether it's for 5 minutes or for 5 years, but it's still rewarding. So I think that's the biggest takeaway for me, is knowing it's rewarding and you are making an impact.
What do you as a father, what do you hope to establish for your kids?
Now that they're older, it's changed a lot. They're 18 and 21. Both of them are in the industry. As scary as that sounds, right? Like, but they're in different avenues of the industry. So, I think the biggest takeaway I could give them at this point is just enjoy it. Don't try and be a hero at this point in time. Learn all you could possibly learn and have fun along the way. I tell my oldest Brennan all the time, like, don't get wrapped into the drama. Don't get wrapped into the drugs and that aspect of the industry. Get wrapped up into
Mhm.
making your skills better, owning your mess ups, perfecting that dish that you've been working on for the last 2 months. Enjoy it at the same time, because ultimately, like, you have to have fun with what you do in life. If you're an
Yeah.
HR manager or you're a truck driver or what I do or even what you do. You have to love what we do.
Yep.
My hope is that they are successful. They're both talented, and I may be biased, but that's okay. But like, I think we are as parents, but
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of growth that needs to be made on both of their behalves because they're still young and they're still foolish doing stupid things. But my hope for them is that they just ultimately love what they do and they continue to fall in love with it day in and day out. So, and it was cool, like watching my oldest cook for Luke Bryant or Brian, whatever. I don't know. I don't do country music, so I don't know his actual name. But this big superstar, he's on American Idol, friends with Katy Perry, blah blah blah. Like, the dude goes into
Mhm.
my son's work where he was working, and like my son makes him a dish, walks out, hands to him, says thank you, like gets to meet him afterwards and chit chats. And, he sends us the picture with the big grin and smile on his face because he's excited. And that's the part I want them to take away, not the part that's dark, dirty, depressing, or, the Anthony Bourdain style that people are
Yeah.
falling to these days. So yeah, it's a beautiful beast is the way I describe the restaurant industry. So, yeah, man, I want my kids to be happy. I want them to flourish in life no matter what they do. And if they get out of the industry, they get out of the industry, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So,
In your journey, was there a moment where you finally realized, like, I'm not the same person I was back then?
yeah, and that I struggle with that, like a part of me stays grounded in where I've come from in terms of the homeless life and whatnot,
Mhm.
because I feel if I let that go, I will lose sight of where I've come from and let it go to my head, and I don't want it to go to my head. I want to stay grounded and humble with what I do, and I have my moments, dude. I'll
Mhm.
cook for an NFL guy, big ego, but then you got to get grounded because I come home, my wife's like, I don't care who you cook for. Like, I was having a conversation yesterday, like with my wife. We went and saw the movie, and I was like, dude, Jay Feely just texted me. And if you know anything about Jay Feely, he's the ex kicker of the Cardinals and good friend of mine, but like big name in the
Yeah.
NFL at one point. And he texted me Merry Christmas, and I'm like, dude, this is wild. Like, I
Yeah.
love it, but also my wife's like, dude, I don't really care. He's just a dude. Shut up. Go. We got stuff to do, So while
Yeah.
I'm like geeking out, I have to remember I gotta stay grounded and I have to stay level headed with the whole thing. And she's really good about it because I will get carried away. And I'll brag about who I've cooked for, the bands I cook for,
Yeah.
in the Bahamas. She's like, bro, I don't care. Like, you're home right now. You need to focus on what needs to take place in the house. And these are just people. They eat the same. They do everything else the same. They sleep, nap, whatever.
Yeah.
I lost my train of thought, but I think that the most important thing is just staying grounded in how you do it. I have my struggles, my codependencies with overthinking and
Yeah.
you know, still alcohol is there, but it's not prominent, like if I'm having
Yeah.
a bad day, that's what I want to reach for. Thankfully, my wife is like, dude, no, stop,
Mhm.
so, but like Legos are the healthiest thing for me. 43 on the 31st of this month, and I'm still
Mhm.
playing with kid shit. So it's, it's
Yeah.
fine though. I love it.
Yeah,
But
I think it's cool to always have something that brings us back to like a childhood space, because I think like for me, I love wrestling. Wrestling is forever something that will be embedded in my lifestyle. Whether I stop watching it for a year or two, I'm always coming right back to it, and it always
right,
bring me to a place where I'm like feeling like a kid again and feeling really excited, and it's something I could talk about for hours with anybody
right.
who's a wrestling fan.
Yeah. Do you remember the Bushwhackers? Not to cut you off.
The Bushwhackers, no, I don't remember
Bushwhackers.
them.
So they were big. I want to say right before the hype of like Hulk Hogan, the
I
WWF. Like,
Yeah, no, probably that's before my time. I'm in the era of
I just aged myself, but that's okay.
yeah, I'm in the era of the Attitude Era, probably when Stone Cold Steve Austin was going against Vince McMahon and The Rock was arising as
Oh wow.
The Rock
Okay,
from Rocky. Yeah. But that's where that
that's funny.
it's always nice to have something that can bring you back to childhood memories and make you feel young again, because sometimes
Right.
as we get older we sort of forget and lose our ways or whatever and things like that. But I'm really curious. How did you become vice chair of the shelter uh that once helps, serve you? What was that like for you, and what are you doing? What is your role as vice chair?
So I was approached about being on the board probably about 5 years ago
Mm,
and got accepted, voted on, but I didn't have the time. Working in a restaurant, you're obligated to work as
mm,
much as you possibly can. So I backed out, and then geez, I think this is my second year I'm on. So almost 2 years ago or so, I
mm,
was approached about it again, and I didn't know what I was walking into. We'll be real. So I just went through the motions the first year,
mm,
went to the board meetings, missed board meetings, whatever. And then my buddy Brian, who also sits on the board, he's actually the chair of the board right now. Him and I were not the officers we are right now on the board. So he's like, "Hey, I've been asked to, be put on the ballot to be chair of the board. How would you like to be by my side as the vice chair?" And I was like, "Bro, this is big. Like, I've never thought of ever being on a board, period, because it always
mm.
sounded super boring." And then obviously the only board I've ever seen was on TV, and we won't talk about that because that's a I'm not trying to get into. But
Yeah.
for me, it was like, okay, I've gone through the motions of being on the board, not only being on the board, but living what this board represents and helps
Mhm,
maintain. But then now I could actually get behind the scenes, dive into the nitty gritty of what makes the organization tick. And so I went with it. Now, it wasn't official until we got voted on, but it's kind of a cakewalk when the two people that are on the ballot are the only two people on the ballot. So it's like, what do you do? But you go through the motions, you still got to do the, voting process. But for me, it was a pivotal moment in my life because I not only overcame homelessness, but now I have like an even greater chance of making a deeper impact for the residents. And so I've always had the approach of, how am I helping somebody today? And the biggest realization for me being on the board is, today isn't always discussed on the board. We're
mm,
thinking 5, 10 years down the road, which is okay. You have to have that foundation of looking forward and planning for the future, and making adjustments as time goes on. But it's still a, what can I do now for the
mhm,
residents in my life? And right now, what can I do? Offer up a dinner, auction off a dinner, and that money goes towards impacting the residents. And with the money we raised last year, I was able to sponsor the unit I lived in with my two kids for an entire year. And so that's an impact that not only reflects my personal growth, but it
mhm.
shows the current residents that this guy once lived here and they could be in his shoes at one point. And that's huge for me because I didn't have a lot growing up. And I didn't think I'd have a lot, towards the latter years of my life, but here I am, and I'm able to do something info that can change lives. And it does. One of the impactful things that took place the day we did the ceremony was, there's a little girl, her mom struggled with abuse of some sort and couldn't
Mhm.
pay rent, was barely making ends meet. And the daughter was just like, "I love baking cupcakes. I'm going to bake cupcakes and sell these cupcakes, and I'm going to put that money towards paying rent." When I did the ceremony, this little girl walked up with 2 dozen cupcakes for me, and I cried,
Wow.
because it was just like, "Oh, I got cupcakes." No, it was like, this little girl has such a drive that most kids her age don't even think of having. And she's putting up her talents to better her mom's life without even thinking of the impact of her own life. And so when that happened, like, I was like, okay, I'm making a difference. I'm making a difference. And I may not know all the ins and outs of who I'm touching in terms of my
Mhm,
story or growth, but like, the reality of it is, like, this little girl is watching everything unfold, and she's able to
mhm,
take it and turn it into her own story, share, what helped her along the way, whether my name is mentioned or not. Like, there was an impactful moment in her life that it changed, and it's
right.
seen. And, fast forward to the gala in 2026, I was approached about sponsoring a table because I'd sponsor a table, I have the last 2 years. And
Mhm,
I was asked to do the sponsorships. I sponsored a table, but then they're like, well, we want you to sponsor the cakewalk. The cakewalk is essentially where all these bakeries donate cakes and they auction them off. And now these cakes from Bunt Cake, let's say, will auction off for
Mhm.
$3, $4, $5,000. And
Mhm.
I jumped on sponsoring the cakewalk because the little girl is starting off the cakewalk by auctioning off her cupcakes. And
Wow.
yeah, to me, I'm just like it doesn't get any better than that, you know? And
Yeah.
again, my circle is circulating yet another impactful moment in her life that she will remember forever. And the board is great. The board does what the board does, but it's not going to have the same impact that I have on this little girl. It'll have
Mhm.
organizational impacts later on in the years, but like I don't think I'd ever have that opportunity. And maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think I would have had this opportunity or scenario play out the way it did if I wasn't on the board, because I probably wouldn't have tried as hard to make an impact on somebody's life, or I wouldn't have committed to making a change for the
Yeah.
better. I would have just been like, it's another dinner I've auctioned off. Cool. I'll pocket none of that, but put out the food costs and serve these people and move on with my life.
Yeah.
I'll do it again next year, you know?
Yeah.
Um, Having such an impact, not once, but twice, really just hits home for me. And it makes me feel good about being on the board, even when I may be bored out of my mind some days and talking
Mhm.
numbers or, making hard decisions that will, be reflected in about 5 or 10 years, you know? So,
Yeah.
man, like the board is crazy. And I don't, yeah, it's a good, crazy thing. It's not a bad thing, but yeah, it's heavy.
Yeah.
It really is. And it holds a lot of weight, whether I like to admit it or not.
Wow. Well, as we come to a close to the show, this is a part of the segment I like to call unpopular opinions. And one of my unpopular opinions today is Laurie's seasonings is not should never be your main seasoning in your kitchen. If you're picking up Laurie's seasonings to season everything, I question if you know how to cook or not.
I agree. I agree. That is amazing. Number one, I don't think people know how to use it properly, right? 9 times out
Yeah.
of 10, somebody who's using it is heavy-handed. So the saltiness or the flavor profile takes over the dish. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna give you that one. That's a good. No, that's great. I think another unpopular opinion is that you don't have to have talent to work on the line. I think it's false. You have to have talent to work on the line, whether you think you don't or not. Like I think you do. I don't think that's unpopular, but I think it's just a grand statement of things, or like parsley doesn't have to be used on everything. How about that? Unpopular opinion. Or microgreens, they don't have to be used on everything.
Yeah, that's definitely one. Partially is not a garnish.
Yeah,
If it's not in the dish, one thing my chef always told me, if it's not in the dish, don't put it on a plate.
very true. Yeah, that orange slice in those cheesy diners, like what? There's nothing orange related. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
wild.
So, that's hilarious. Why don't you tell the people where they can find you? Um, talk about a little bit what you got coming up. What's your socials? How they can connect with you and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you could look us up on ansleytable.com. That's ANSLEYTABLE.com. What is that? At Ansley Table. You could also find us at Tableworks, TABLEWORKS. That's the shared kitchen I own now. We're also going to be doing, when I say we, my buddy Isaac, he does all my marketing and stuff like that. And I've never really understood the importance of branding until this year. So
Hmm.
but we're going to be doing a supper club here starting next month called the Story Course, where it takes chefs and puts them in the kitchen and allows them to recreate some of their childhood dishes and tell a story of how those came to light as well. Look us up at the Story Course as well. If you need a good digital marketing agent guy, is it Kill at Digital Sunrise? He'll take care of you. But yeah, dude, I'm all over the place. Tomorrow I have a dinner, but then I hit the floor running. I turned 43 New Year's Eve, which will be wild. And
Wow,
next
43.
43, I'm an old man, but
It's funny because my birthday's January 2nd.
oh, nice. That's cool. Yeah, yeah, that's wild. Early happy
Yeah,
birthday.
it's same to you.
Thank you, thank you. But yeah, dude, like I don't post a lot. I hate social media to a certain extent, but I know the importance of it for the brand and for the company. But all
Mhm.
we do is either online or on social media. So um, yeah, I mean, it's been an
Wow.
absolute pleasure being here and discussing, and hopefully you got the material
Nice.
you need.
Yeah, I think this was a very good conversation. One thing I do want to ask before we go though, since we're going into the new year, what's some of your New Year goals? And that'll be the last thing we leave off with.
New Year goals: work less, be present more, and have fun. You know, we get wrapped up into the, oh, I have to pay this bill, I have to work extra to get this latest and
Hmm.
greatest or whatever. But for me, it's realizing I'm not getting younger. I'm starting to slow down. Things aren't working the best anymore. I need to be present for my wife and the kids more, and allow those younger bucks below me to run things while I oversee things. So
Hmm.
that's where I'm at and where I'd love to be. So, and I want to travel more. My wife and I have a trip to Italy planned in October, and
Nice.
yeah, I want to be able to just walk away when I need to walk away, take her around the world, and enjoy life before it's done. So, yeah, what's up?
Well, thank you, Chef Matt. I appreciate you for coming on Real Chef's Talk. This
Absolutely.
conversation has been wonderful. I look forward to connecting with you even more outside. Continued success to you.
Right on, man. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you for watching. If you have any suggestions, ideas, or things you'll let us see on the show, I really want to hear from you. Email me at realchefstalk@gmail.com. Let me know where you watch it from, what you do, and if you're interested in connecting, collaborating, or even featuring on the show. If you feel like you got something to say and something to add to the conversation, please don't hesitate to reach out. You also can connect with me on all social media platforms: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Spotify, YouTube. Just search Real Chefs Talk, and let's keep the conversation going. I'll drop the link in the description to make it easy for you all to stay connected with me. And I just want to say thank you and that I truly appreciate you all. Until next time.